2 p.m. The first item on our agenda is the approval of an agenda. I take a motion to approve the agenda.
So, I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Mary Beth, seconded by Penny. All those in favor? Item B on our agenda is communications to the School Facility Utilization Task Force. So we received several communications since the last meeting. We've received several communications from Mr. Carlson. Those were regarding the purpose of the task force and opinions on how we should be structuring the work moving forward. We also had some commentary about how we are sharing information that is received by the task force. So again, I want to remind everybody the way that when we get communication from the public on how either through email or through public commentary, where you can find that information is on the website. The way that the information is organized is that if it is a written communication, it is consolidated with the minutes of the agenda document and the minutes of the meeting immediately following the communication when it was received. And then any public comment is stored in the minutes from the evening of that night. So it is a little bit, like you do have to look around for it, but in terms of a timeline and order of information, that's the way the information is organized. That's always the way that we said it was going to be organized. If anybody has any questions or has a hard time following things, please let me know. This one more. Just asking some additional questions about the enrollment analysis that he had put together. And again, what state standards that his report failed to meet. I will respond to that by email to him. One of the reasons that I found it challenging to use that analysis was sort of like two main points for me, which was one, it did not include any analysis of pre-K students. It was just a K through 6 population estimate, which we are legally required to include pre-K to some degree in our school district. So that's one piece. And the other piece is that it didn't have the breakouts by grade, which are important to understanding like when the school is going to be full. But I will respond to him.
There's also some state statutes in terms of requirements for the qualifications of who does those and some other elements that are there as well. So it's not just a subjective decision, there's state criteria.
Yeah. Okay. The other communication we received was an article called Beyond the Numbers, and it is from American School and University Magazine. It's an article by Ben Thompson talking about other schools across the nation who are deciding to consolidate school facilities and ways that they're approaching that data. So then that article is available for people to read online.
And Mrs. Lloyd's letter.
I'm sorry?
And Mrs. Lloyd's letter was also included in our.
Oh my gosh, that's not in my notes here. I'm sorry, we also received Mrs. Lloyd clarifying some of her comments that she made at the last previous meeting. So then those are also available there to make sure that everybody understands where she's coming from. I apologize, that's not in my packet, so I don't have a visual reminder of it for today.
It's on the back side of the agenda.
Well, that's why, because I'm not looking over there. Thank you. Sorry guys, I'm a little sick today, so a little more squirrely than usual. Moving on to item C on our agenda is the School Facility Utilization Task Force Chair's report. So just a couple of minor updates since our last meeting. One, I did have a meeting with the superintendent and Mr. Kleps about kind of talking about programming with the Board of Ed. The output of that meeting was basically we needed to talk directly to the Board of Ed and not just to them. So we moved that conversation to Tuesday's meeting, which we will, the output of that meeting on Tuesday and a robust discussion that we had during the Board of Ed meeting on Tuesday under new business. So we'll talk a little bit more about that then. We also, again, just reinforcing that in terms of understanding sort of like any sort of like staff changes that we like consolidate in these schools, they're still waiting on like a little bit fewer now options to give us that data. So again, more to come on that, but I don't have any like major updates on that for tonight. Really all I have. Updates, sorry, still a couple of weeks. Item D is routine business. I'm looking to approve the minutes from July 16th meeting, so I will take a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
So moved by Penny. Second by Mary Beth. Any discussion?
There's one clarification, so it was, what we rolled out, I believe it was not just pre-K 1, but pre-K 2, and so wanted to make sure that the minutes were very detailed. Kudos to Elizabeth on how detailed they are, but just to make sure in terms of we were, had ruled out that it was clear in that front. Because it's on the last page, I guess actually second to last page, sorry, motion by Kristen, pre-K through grade 1, I think it's pre-K
Yeah.
grade 1 and pre-K grade 2.
Correct, that's right. Yes, to consolidate pre-K through, so on the last page, under item E2, with a motion by Kristen Young to strike the option to consolidate pre-K 1 through grade 1 at Bakerville from the configurations, and seconded by Alicia. That should be amended to say the consolidation of pre-K 1 through grade 2 at that school. The reason being for that was that in order to fit all of the students that we would need to accommodate in those grades at that school, like the footprint for Bakerville didn't make any sense. Those were the ones where it looked like we needed to add a whole extra wing onto Bakerville and you're there. Does anybody object to that amendment to the minutes?
What, you're on letter E?
Under E2, under option E, E2, and then on the back side of that page, the first motion that's there.
Okay, thank you.
It should say pre-K through grade 2.
Okay, now I see it, thank you.
And actually, you wouldn't do, like, pre-K, you wouldn't do either pre-K 1 through grade 2 or pre-K.
That's the way the configuration was laid out.
Okay.
Any other comment on the minutes? Great. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes
As amended.
as amended? That is unanimous. Oh, that was, the vote is 7, so six people in favor. That's Mary Beth, Penny, John, Kristen, Alicia, I'm sorry, and Ben. You were here at the last meeting.
No, I was.
Okay, all right. So just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, great. So we have enough. Carrie, Ben, and Carmen abstained because they were not here at the last meeting. Moving on to item E, new business. So we have here with us tonight Jim McMillan from DAPCO. Thank you so much for coming. He's going to talk a little bit about the implications for transportation if we decide to close down any of the schools and consolidate the populations anywhere else. So Mr. McMillan, thanks for being here tonight, and you can come on up and share your point of view with us.
Thank you, good evening, everyone.
Oh.
So a while ago, we were asked to look at what it would look like if we were to, apologize.
Is he in the meeting? Is he in the Google meeting?
He's on the Google Meet.
Should have definitely sent to.
If you don't see it, then
So I just want to talk, sure, go ahead.
You're in the Google meeting?
I am, but this is not on Google Meet.
can you share that to Google Meet too? Go back to Google Meet and just share this.
I can help you, if you can show me where you're.
Can the people in the audience see the screen?
They will be able to as soon as we.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's his name?
Here's the invite.
What's the most company? Jim. Jim. Thanks. Somebody just asked, who's watching?
And because the agenda just says of school bus, but it's DAPCO, in case anybody's.
Oh, yeah, they know that, they just wanted to make sure they have the right name.
Sorry. Like this. Thank you. Am I good to go yourself? So we need to close and open up again.
That's good. You switch back over to it.
Okay, thanks for bearing with us for a minute there. So we were asked to look at the school district here and see what it would be like with a variety of different circumstances, depending upon which schools were closed. So, so what we looked at is what if we closed New Hartford Elementary, leaving Bakerville and Angelini open. The second one is if we close Bakerville and left New Hartford and Angelini open. And the third one is closing both Bakerville and New Hartford and just leaving Angelini open, having all the kids go there. Kind of to set a level here, just so we're looking at the data from last year's kids. I can't project the future, and I don't know really when you're even thinking about doing this. So we looked at last year's route. So the actual pickup in times may vary as we move into the future. What it does show is the actual time the students would be on the bus. Some of them, when you look at it, some of them are getting to Angelini at 8:17 and some at 8:20 and some at 8:29. We would just shift that around once we know what the bell time is, so they all arrive at the same time. The way we calculated the time is from first pickup, which is when we pick up the first student and we drop them off at school in the AM, and the PM, it's when we pick them up at school and drop off at the last stop. We don't include deadhead time, which is time to get to the first stop, back to, the last stop, back to the office. So the first one we looked at was if we just bused Bakersville and Angelini. Well, what I looked at here are the routes. The first number is the first pickup, drop off at the first school, which is typically Bakersville, then over to Angelini. It shows the total time of the route, 56 minutes. There's 40 students, and we make 29 stops picking up 40 students. In the afternoon, the bell time at Angelini, I believe, is 3:05. By the time the buses leave, we give them about 7 minutes to load, so they leave around 3:12. It drops off the last child at 4:08. It's 56 minutes, 17 stops, 27 kids. And that's what we looked at all of these routes. Go ahead.
Just a quick question before
Sure.
we start looking at this. What's the point of reference of what it is right now in terms of the average time a student is on a bus with the existing structure?
I can show you what routes look like afterwards this
Okay.
year, and I can show you the times. So with the most of the Bakerville to Angelini routes wouldn't change. That will change a little bit because right now, just for, again, level setting, we use 9 buses in here, 7 of them to go to Bakersville and Angelini, and 2 just go to New Hartford. So really what you end up doing, depending upon how you go, you could take the 2 New Hartford buses and blend them in. Bakersville, I don't know if you'd save anything on buses at this point, that's further discussion. So the routes are pretty much going, these that you're looking at are pretty much the same. Okay, we try to keep them all under an hour. That's what we've been asked to do. If you want to get them under to a 45-minute, we can take a look at that, but obviously that might include any extra buses, okay?
But you have information about like what the max route is, like what the max length of a route is this year?
The future year, we
Yeah.
finished for
Sorry, for the
26, 27, we have the routes out there.
Okay,
They're all different. Routing, obviously, it's about picking up children, get them safe to school, but when I look at purely from an operational standpoint, it's time and distance.
Yeah.
how much distance do we need to cover and to get a bell time?
Yeah.
So by the time we, get there and drop off, and one of the reasons we don't do Antolini and New Hartford is because by the time we drop them off at New Hartford Elementary and then have to come all the way down to Antolini, it just adds a lot of extra time.
Yeah.
So it's easier to pick up all the kids and then come down to Bakersville and the quicker trip over to here, okay? So as you can see, the majority of these routes are running close to an hour. Some of that has to do with, and we can talk about that at another time, that we do a lot of stops. And we do a lot of stops that are fairly close to each other. And I can show you a route, I appreciate there's no sidewalks. You have some busy roads, but at some point in time, if we wanted to take a look at it, we could put in no crossroads, but there are other roads that are safe for children to be on. We drive down a number of cul-de-sacs. And in most of our markets, we don't take buses down cul-de-sacs because it's fine today. But on the first Wednesday in January, when it snows and the garbage has to be out, we have snowbanks and garbage cans. It's very difficult to navigate around them. So there's some ways we could cut down on the amount of stops. When I looked at this, we do a lot of stops per route. We do not have a lot of group stops where we're picking up 10 or 15 kids at a time. And I understand that's part of the way this town operates. You can't have kids walking all over town, especially the K-2 kids. In most towns, kindergartners are always picked up at home. So that's, so we went on to look at if we closed Bakersville and we just did New Hartford and Annalee. The times come down a little bit. More kids on buses. And that changes drastically because the New Hartford kids today are running very short routes because all we do is pick those kids up and they just go to New Hartford Elementary School. So those routes are probably taking 35, 40 minutes at the most. That bus is not then turning around and coming down to Antolini. And then finally, busing just to Antolini. Again, understand this isn't a perfect world because to do this properly, we would have to, we'd have to stop what we're doing today, take everything out and start all over again. And typically when we do that, it's a redistricting for the town and we have to talk about what the cost to do that because it's a lot of time to do it. It's not a simple task. So at this point, we left the kids who are riding today at the stop they're on today. We just changed to pick up what school they get dropped off and added into them. So, the routes in this program, the routes aren't going to change a lot. We're not going to change the number of buses. All we've done is kind of just rearranged everything. So what I'm saying is all the options we looked at today, we still need 9 buses. And that's based on what we know today and the kids who are riding the bus today. All routes, the things that can affect them are obviously your student population, where the children live, and ultimately which schools you decide to open or close. And something to think about is, I know in New Hartford, we get a lot of parent pick up and drop off. And is that same group of parents going to drop their kids off at the other 2 schools? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on what parents will do. From a 10,000-foot view, it would make the most sense to close New Hartford because it's 2 buses and we blend those kids in and do Bakersville and Antolini. From purely a transportation standpoint, it would be easier just to go to 1 school. But, I've been in this town for 10 years now, and I have a feel for what goes on here, and I'm not sure the general population is ready for 1 school. But, purely from a transportation, that's probably the one where we went that route, we may be able to look at bus savings. The other 2, you're just moving the kids from this school to that school and back and forth. It's probably not going to cut any buses.
But we wouldn't need to add buses either, because it's, I think we were looking at that too, just to make sure unintended consequences consequences, right? So,
I don't see, based on today's data, I would not see you adding buses. If we were to do, if at some point in time you were to decide that you want to look at two options, I would say to you then, let's do a whole redistrict. Let's use the most recent data you have and then move stops and buses around and see what it looks like. But I don't foresee it being more than 9 buses. So what's next? Obviously for us, and I know this is a long-term plan, is really, we need to determine what, if anything, you're going to change. And once we decide what the changes are to, then we can do a review of, I'd like to do a review of the present routing, looking at what they are today, where they go, and the number of stops. I'm not looking to change anything. I just think at times it would be great if everybody saw this. Sometimes people think school busing is just, I put my kid on in the morning, he comes home in the afternoon. There's a lot more to that. And as you saw, when you look at these routes, some of these routes are taking 35 kids, making 29 stops. And the way school busing works is it's really just the mare in the afternoon. So if your child is the first one on in the morning, he's the last one off on the afternoon. Because it flips it, it runs just the opposite way. So, and then, we have to do a full route analysis and really take a look at kind of what you want to do. Do you want to see if we can cut buses? The answer obviously would be yes. Can we cut buses? I don't know until we do that. It would change everything. It would change pickup times. It would change drop-off times. It probably would change some bus stops. But again, and kind of until we decide what schools you're going to do or not do, it's hard to me to say, yep, 100% we can do that. Okay? That's the end of my presentation, and I can take questions.
This is great. Do you have data that you can show us that, like, what it looks like for the 3 schools right now? Because I think I'd like to understand what that
Yeah,
looks like.
baseline, change from baseline.
What?
Change from baseline.
Yeah, basically, like, there's a lot of long bus rides on there, but I don't know what it is right now to help me understand what the reality is.
Show my screen.
Oh, I can bring it over to you.
Yeah, it's mine. I just gotta log in. Thank you. No, can't see this yet.
Yeah, when you tell me you do everything.
You can plug that in. Go ahead. It's up.
Then you do this.
I was gonna say, how can I get it on this screen?
You're good.
So these are all the routes in our system, so they are named sequentially.
Oh, you're gonna need to flip back over in a second. Sorry.
Well, we can see it here if I can't get
This is what
in,
you want.
but it shows you
This is what you want here.
anyone here.
Or if you want here, there's a screen there, which.
That one's good.
This one?
So this is, in today's world, this is Route 1 Antolini. The first stop is on Cedar Lane, and you can see, just looking at this, that this route has a lot of stops on it. And if you get in closer and closer, just from our standpoint, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just on this road here, and I can tell you what the name of the road is, we're making 9 stops. Just for scale, if you look down here, this distance is 0.2 of a mile. So this is probably less than a mile. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just something we can take a look at as you go on. This route, we don't, so it starts at 728. Still not.
You're gonna have to navigate on this screen up here to, yeah.
The mouse is not there. It is. And this route, as you can see, it drops off at Bakersville at 18 and it's there at 8:24. So this route is running about the same amount of time because nothing's changed. Because if we closed New Hartford, this route stays the same. Depending upon where the New Hartford kids are, will determine, they could be up in this area, we would put them on this bus, and we may be able to do it without adding buses, because this is a 77 passenger vehicle, which you can see up here, and we only have 40 students on it, so we could easily put 5 or 6 more kids on that bus. Typically, a 77 passenger bus means there's 3 kids to a seat to get to 77. I don't like to do that if we don't have to, because even at this level, children are a variety of sizes. They carry backpacks that are bigger than most of them, and so, if we get to 2 kids to a seat, typically 2 is around 54 kids. So in our heads, that's a number we like to keep in mind. So we do have some room on this bus to take some of the kids in another area. So these routes won't change, but what I will show you is,
Before you leave this screen, sorry, I just want to ask one question. So up here, this is saying that the route is 1 hour and 16 minutes, which is much longer than you're saying, but it looked like it was starting from when the bus leaves, right?
Yeah, so this bus is used in the morning. It starts at Northwest High School.
Yeah.
And then comes back into town. So that's what we call deadhead time.
Yeah.
And so I don't count that time, and nor do I count the time at the end. You can see here that it goes to Antolini and then it comes back to the yard. So there's 6 minutes of what we call deadhead time.
So Kristen,
I understand. So I guess what I'm looking for is like, what is the route?
can our ask follow-up be to have the exact same set of tables, exact same table that you prepare for the other options for the current state? So we can just look across the.
What I'm trying, for our purposes, what I want to understand is.
It's harder to do that when we can take a look at it, only
Because
because
that's what you're trying to get to. is-
Yeah, we want to, everybody is concerned about the amount of time that students spend on the bus, so I'm trying to make sure we have, spend on the bus,
Yeah,
and
so
I'm trying to normalize
with
that.
this one, we just started at 7:28.
Right, so there's a
That's the first stop.
13-minute difference, so this
This time-
would look like 1 hour and 3 minutes on the
And it's
other
not.
spreadsheet, okay.
So there's
like
13
minutes
plus
off of that.
6, there's
What?
gonna be, 13 plus 6 is gonna be.
Right, like all the other, all the
difference
ones you're
to
looking
that,
at with
so
just
it would
students,
be
but
an
yeah.
hour and.
An
And that's
hour
what I
and 3 minutes.
said.
Again, not substantively
Yeah.
different, but that was I was looking at this, and I was like, this is much longer than we were just looking at.
From the
right?
first New Hartford elementary child until we drop them off.
Yeah.
So not knowing where that child goes, if he goes to, if that child, because in this system, those are both elementary kids, so we can put the 3 through 6 with the K to 2. So there is some extra time. So what I used was the 7:28, 8:30, so that, I'm sorry, the 8:24. So that route is 1 hour and 3 minutes.
Was 13 on the front, sorry, I
And
cannot believe
6.
I'm doing this, not in 6, so 19, so there's really
57.
57 minutes for the kids, okay.
And that's what we looked at. Okay?
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, But you can see that every stop just continues to add a minute.
Right.
This route probably in real time runs a little longer because every child isn't out there. The minute we go, from here to here, although it says it's going to take a minute, by the time this child loads up and this child walks out, it could add a few more minutes. Okay?
I see on Gillette Road there, which I happen to live on Gillette Road, and I always wondered, like, I would see 3 buses go by my house. And my son would go on one of the buses. Why do we have 3 buses going by? And you're picking up on Gillette Road.
They're different times, those 3 buses, they're going to different schools at different times.
Because we're running buses to Hartford up there, and the New Hartford buses don't go there. And again, based on time and distance, you have to make sure all the other kids, so that may be a central road, but when you look at this route, it also goes all the way down to here. So.
You're like, I could see one go down Barron's Road, and this is all within, waiting for the buses. One's going down Barron's, one's going out Gillette to, which is the one my son went on, out to 202 to pick up Ramstein.
Yeah, they're 2 different routes.
It's just a popular route.
Nothing passes.
All the buses.
So this is hard to see, and it's very small, and I get it. These are all the routes we run. And you can see that there is a lot of overlap, especially in the middle. But when you click on the different colors, it'll tell me that this is a route and it's 1 hour and 3 minutes. And again, please don't.
Without the dead time. I mean, that has.
Don't get hung up on the
Yeah.
time, as I said, it will vary. But you can see that this route comes up and down this way. You click on the green route.
The other buses are.
On the small screen. Again, you can see where the routes all go. You can just see the different colors. They're all in this area. So they all use, a lot of the buses go up and down this road, but again, I don't have to tell you, there's not 100 different roads. So you could live on a popular road. And so, yeah, there could be 3 buses. Plus, we're using 7 buses to do Bakersville. So all 7 of them could go up the road. Because again, when we looked at that one route, there were, 10 stops in there. That bus is picking up 54 kids and 35 stops. So again, I'm not asking for anything, but that's something as a group, we just all need to look at and understand. So you understand it, the public understands it, that, because I'll be honest with you, my least favorite thing in the morning, get stuck behind a school bus. I work here, I understand it, but I still find it very frustrating. And if the bus is only going from my driveway to your driveway to your driveway to your driveway, I'm like, can we just?
People are maniacs about it.
So there is some of that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and some roads are just, they're too curvy and hilly.
Yeah, and our biggest
Gillette Road
concern,
is.
right, is safety.
Yeah.
These are, we're fondly saying we're not FedEx, UPS, great companies, don't want to offend anybody in the world. They're good companies, they move boxes, you lose a box, we're upset. You lose a child, it's a big deal. A child gets hurt, it's a big deal. So even on the routing standpoint, we have to take that into consideration. There's roads that kids can't cross. So sometimes you'll see a route in the afternoon takes longer because we have to go a different way to drop the kid off on the correct side of the road.
And even the snowbank consideration, I think that's something like seasonality. There's no room on the roads during
Yeah.
snowbank season. Just
But if you take the New Hartford Elementary route, this route starts at 7:20 and it ends at 8:09. So because this is all it does, this is the yard, just so you know. And I know Bakersville is there and Anthony is really close. But you can see that this bus does all this to get back to here. So, from stop 2 stop 3, it's 12 minutes. So when I say routing is about time and distance, it's where the child lives. So just to go from here to here is taking us 12 minutes to pick up one child. And you can see that most of these stops only have one child. So that's the difference. So these children probably, because Hartford Elementary is, Bakersville is down here, we pick them up on another bus and bring them down. Again, tell me, let us know what you want to do, and then we can do a real in-depth study. I can put together the times of today's routes and compare, I can put them on the same spreadsheet I showed you before, so we can compare where we are today to what we're projecting.
I would really love it. I assume everybody else here would really like it. For our records and like be able to, part of what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody who can't be here tonight understands what's going on.
And I'll take out all the deadhead time, and
Yeah.
it'll just be first stop to last stop, which.
That would be really helpful for us, just to normalize what's going on.
And so that's really what we're looking at.
Okay.
I think that just the two elementary schools aren't going to change things drastically in terms of cost.
Yeah.
If you decide to just go with Antolini, then it may or may not. Again, because I don't know how many parents would opt out of driving and have a child take a bus. And right now, I believe we move about 330 kids.
Around that.
Pardon me?
Around that.
On the
Yeah.
bus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
When I did the first report, I didn't look at it simple. I just counted the number of kids on the bus, and they think it came out to 332. Believe me, might not be 100% accurate, but it's pretty close.
I think there's more children than that in our school system, but a lot
Yeah,
of
we
people
talked
drop
about
off.
like 450.
Well, you have the pre-K.
What?
So start with the totals, they take round
Right,
numbers,
but still 420 if you take out,
400.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's another potential 80 students that may opt back into transportation depending upon which way you go.
Right.
And again, 50 kids is a bus, so that potentially could add 2 buses.
That's like rough math, it's like 20% of kids right now, it sounds like are being like dropped off. What is typical? Do you have any idea, or do you just get the bus count?
I don't know. It's all anecdotal. I can tell you post-COVID, that number has increased substantially.
Yeah.
Most schools in the state of Connecticut were not designed for parent pickup at the level it's in today, and it interferes with buses. Not a complaint, just a fact. The schools just weren't designed to have 50 cars and 10 buses all at the same time. But I think the percentage of people driving has risen substantially.
Yeah.
And it depends upon the town, the school, all those things.
But do you still have to make sure that there's a seat on the bus when you're doing your contracts? You have to have so many buses. Don't you have to prepare for a seat for every
No,
child?
we don't have to. We
Right.
can if that's what the town wants to do. There are towns that parents are allowed to opt out of busing and we don't have to provide them a seat. Let me put it back up. We can provide them a seat if that changes, because most of our buses aren't running at capacity.
Right.
It's nice to know when kids aren't going to come, because if we had to route 400 kids on 9 buses, a 77 passenger bus could have 100 kids. And we hope no 100 kids don't show up. So legally, my understanding is you don't have to have a seat for every child. If that's what you want to do, we're happy to do that. I don't believe we do that today because we're not routing 400 kids. Like I said, we take 332, so there's some percentage. There's a lot of things we can do. There's towns that if the child doesn't ride the bus for X number of days, we notify the town calls the parent says, no, I'm gonna be driving them. We'll take them off the bus and say to the parent, if you ever need the child to put back on the bus, just call us. The routing software we use today allows us to do it instantly, so if you call us today, the child is on the bus today. What we prefer not to be is a limousine service where we're not really on demand, so you can't call us every morning and say, nope, my car's working, nope, it's not. Yes, that's not kind of what we'd like to do, but again, we're here to work for you, but it's.
I'm gonna chime in here just for like those of you who don't have kids in the schools right now. Every summer, the school district sends out like a form to parents, and we have to like let them know whether or not we're gonna opt their kids into the buses. for the following school year.
And then we pull a file over every night, and it tells us who's eligible for transportation and who isn't. We only route those that are eligible. And if if the district wants them to be eligible, I believe we use Power School here, school just turns money, comes through, and we will route them right away. Adding a couple kids to a bus, isn't really a big issue. We can turn it around in a day.
One other contextual piece for everybody here, no, and this is not you, this is more informational thing here, busing starts at kindergarten. Pre-K kids are not allowed, like, they don't take the bus, they need to be dropped off and picked up regardless of what, unless they need special transportation as part of their, like, special ed needs. In which case they wouldn't go on the bus anyway.
I was gonna say, we don't move pre-K kids for you.
Right, yeah. And any other questions from the task force? Or, okay, everybody on the task force comfortable opening up for a question from the audience? Go ahead.
I just wanted
Just shout loudly your name and address for the minutes.
Shelley Lloyd, 29 Pioneer Drive in Hartford. I just wanted, I think I'm right, but I want clarification from Jim. You currently run 9 buses to Angelini School, and if they go to Bakerville and then come to Angelini. So you have 9 buses coming to the site at the current time. If, from what your presentation said, if we went to only using Angelini School for everyone, we would still be running 9 buses to this school. Am I wrong about that or right about that? Unless.
No one's ever wrong, so let me clarify it.
Clarify, yeah.
We run 9 buses for New Hartford. 2 of the 9 only do New Hartford. 7 of the 9 do Bakersville and Angelini. So we're only running 7 buses presently to Angelini.
Okay, so you'd be running 9 to Angelini, maybe.
I believe that based on today's information, if we were just to go to Angelini, we would still need 9 buses to get all the kids down here.
Got it, okay.
But please, that's not a quote. We can do a more in-depth study and see what it is. But based on what I know today, we would need 9 buses.
That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Taylor Johnson, 182 Gillette Road, New Hartford. So your goal is to make sure that these kids are safe getting on the bus, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so who determines, the exact stop that the kids get on? And actually, I should take that back. Is it only kindergartners that cannot cross the road?
That's, I don't know the answer, but I don't know what the transportation policy is for this town. So you would have to ask them. We prefer not to have kindergartners cross the road. Some towns they do,
Okay, so it's just kindergartners,
but we would prefer to pick them up door side
okay,
because it's just safer.
okay.
If
So-
possible, I do think it's probably possible that might vary based on the road, right? Like, I don't imagine that any student is crossing 202.
No, and that's
So
not,
like,
that's not what I'm saying.
yeah, no, yeah, I just want to make sure that that's clear for everybody here.
So who determines like the best spot to pick up the child? And at what point is it deemed that it's not safe to pick up a child at said spot if something happens?
It's a wide open question. So the routing software just puts it somewhere on the map, which is, so at the end of your driveway, just for the sake of discussion. If a bus stop is unsafe, you can call VACO. We have a full safety department, or I myself will go out and determine what's safe or not safe. I typically look at traffic patterns, the number of cars across the road, and get the police involved if we have to. I don't typically get involved in bears and animals, and because I'll go up there and they won't be there. I'm kind of half kidding, but we have had people call and say, that my kid can't stand at that stop, there's bears. But if you think it's an unsafe stop, feel free to call DATCO, or I will take your information before I leave today and we can take a look at it.
Perfect, because I've called and left multiple voicemails.
With us,
Yes, I have, because the bus route was supposed to be changed for this year for my child. So.
I actually can take a look at it before we leave.
for the same reason. All right, thank you, appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. McMillan? Anything from online?
No hands are raised.
Great. All right,
I'll just say
thank you, sir.
That was a-
Thank you.
That was a great
Sorry.
presentation.
Thank you for your time,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you so much.
So you'll email Kristen the updated table, or the entire size plus that table?
Yeah. Maybe a week or so.
That's, okay, about a week.
It's crazy right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, this is terrible timing for this, appreciate you coming out. We'll get that updated, version onto the website once we have it from you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'll get it down there.
So. Yep, very nice.
Sorry.
No, you're all right.
Thank you very much.
Turn off the screen.
Moving on to the next item under new business is a review of the Board of Education discussion on August 18th and guidance on next steps for the task force. So I'm going to provide a little bit of a summary of the conversation we had with the Board of Ed on Tuesday. John, Penny, or anybody else who was there, Mary Beth and Carmen were both there in the audience too. Like, please feel free to supplement what I'm saying to make sure that I'm covering everything. But what I want to just talk about sort of like the questions that we posed, as well as some of basically the discussion that we have, which resulted in some recommendations that I want to make for our work for us to do tonight. So of every Board of Ed meeting, I provide a report on the most recent readout of what's going on with the task force. So I basically provided a summary of where we were with the analysis that Michelle, our conquering hero, had completed the course of analysis that we had expected to do for the course of this, and that right now we're really trying to figure out what other information we need to feel comfortable making a decision, and that we had some questions. Most of that conversation, I would say and the real thing that we were looking to gather from them was really around programming, right? So again, there's a discrepancy between what is being offered in the schools right now versus what a lot of the options that we're looking at have in the schools in terms of programming. And when you look at the cost discrepancy for that, the programming needs, the stated programming needs by the administration are they're blowing out the sides of the buildings compared to what we have right now today. And what the basic, I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit here in terms of what's going on, but the basic question was, well, if we have questions for the Board of Ed that are specific to programming needs, we can ask them and try to get more information specifically from them. But it was not possible to do that in just sort of a quieter meeting, because it is something that we need the whole Board of Ed's input on versus just kind of collaborating with the superintendent or anything like that. That's sort of I think the gist of what I want to get across tonight. I'm going to pause and look at all of you who were there the other night and ask if you want to add anything at this juncture.
When you said it's the programming, I wasn't sure I followed you.
Yes.
Is blown out compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
You mean from this the plan that we've already seen before, or things that the school people would like to see?
It's those things, right? And that's sort of and what I'm getting, your question is getting to what I'm was trying to drive at to them, which is basically, there's a lot of things in the programming that again, it's a little unclear whether or not they're necessary or whether or not it's what the administration would like to see. And we need a little bit more of a guidance there. So at a very concrete example.
The options that we provide.
Right. Putting aside the option A, which is just looking at maintaining the 3 buildings with the footprint that they have today, all of the other configurations where we're trying to fit in the needs for special ed, kind of taking a look at configurations where, for example, the gym is split out from the cafeteria, all of those things that are really making it complicated to stick to any existing footprint if we were to close one school. What is the Board of Ed guidance for how we as the task force should be evaluating all of those options for the purposes of our work? Knowing that there's probably a little bit of a gap between, just a big gap, right? I think we're all kind of circulating around that. And we've all also kind of, identified that it's not the task force place to determine what programming should be included, but we need additional input to understand, from my perspective, I need a little bit more additional input to understand, how to take some of these numbers seriously.
And what would be like a tier of a priority, like of the different programmings, you know, sped versus, do they really want a separate art and music group, just as an example?
The example, like, those are great examples of things that, like, you know, I'm wrestling with right now, and we don't have clear input from the Board of Ed on. And so, basically, what I would say is that the guidance that we got from the Board of Ed was that, you know, like, we're expecting to understand the baseline. Option A is like the baseline, right? Like, this is what it costs to maintain the 3 buildings in some fashion in the way that they are right now. We want to understand a version that looks at what a 21st century school should look like, which covers a lot of the programming stuff, and like maybe something a little bit more in the middle. So, but if we have specific questions for them about like what that means, like, we should talk to them about that. So what I was going to propose tonight is that we basically make a list of like very like clear questions about like what would be, how can we get more information about like what would be considered or what would be, you know, necessary for the schools. So for example, if we consolidate down to 1 or 2 schools, is it absolutely necessary for there to be a separate gym and cafeteria? What is the Board of Ed's position on that? All of the configurations include that right now. The administration is saying that that is what's necessary, but like validating that with the Board of Ed is like one particular example of a question for that. I have a couple other like questions that I thought would probably be.
So Mary Beth highlighted 4.
Yeah, Mary Beth had like great questions. That she was in here. I thought I had this document up. But I don't. Yeah, go ahead, read your questions. You don't remember.
I do remember.
It's okay, I have them, I just have to, okay.
So I did mention the combined gym and cafeteria.
Yeah.
At the Board of Ed meeting, they mentioned a $500,000 grant that New Hartford received to work on bringing special ed services, or to broaden the services that we offer to bring students back into district. And also we're working with Canton, so it would be bringing other students in. So looking at something like that would mean, do we want to expand the space that you need for special ed? I mean, I thought that was really.
Well, does that mean the Oakville classrooms are used
Right,
for
it
that?
may not be like an expansion over what we have right now, but just an allocation of room to that kind of program within the buildings right now.
So that was one. The another one I would like to understand is one of the configurations where we are considering is taking 2nd grade and moving it to Anthony. And there are a lot of financial considerations to that, but from the Board of Ed perspective, I see it as a structural change, and I want to know if they would sign on to that, because if they wouldn't, then we're kind of wasting our time.
Yeah, that's a good one. Would they even consider? Is
Right.
that something that they would
Right.
consider?
Right.
Right.
And there was one more that,
The other one that you had, I found my document, so the other one was basically how many pre-K classrooms should be planned for
right,
in all of this, like,
because we seem to go back and forth on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And those were just some examples, but that's.
so that's like, those were great seed questions, right? And again, from a cost perspective, like, I mean, there's a whole list of stuff that goes into programming, right? Like, in terms of like more teacher space, or, you know, like consolidating central office, and some of those I feel like those are not like the big movers to me, because my expectation would be that if and when we get to a place where we are looking at actually like a footprint of any building, some of those kind of requests would be limited by, you know, whatever, they would be limited at that point. It would be like there must be some nice to haves in there. But there were some that seemed really critical that took up a lot of space, which really impacted the thing. And so I wanted to get a little bit more direction on that. The only other thing that I was thinking about, that was also like a space taker upper, sorry for terrible language, was really just like whether or not we should be separating out the art and music rooms, or like how much like duplicative space we could be planning for, right? So those were the 5 questions that I was kind of like, Mary Beth seated for, so thanks a whole lot of them. But I added the other one, but I wanted to like kind of get clarification from you guys about those questions, if they feel right to you, if there's anything else that we should be deciding. I'd like to get to a place where I'm like, at the end of this meeting, I've got that list of questions that those of us here can agree on, and I can send that to the Board of Ed tonight, and they can action on it at the next Board of Ed meeting from a discussion standpoint.
So the multipurpose room, kind of along the lines of, would they even consider putting second grade up here? Would the Board of Ed consider repurposing the multipurpose room?
Yes, I can certainly add that. I would have a hard time saying no because it's so little utilized right now, but like, we can add that to the list for
Yeah.
sure.
I don't know, I know we briefly spoke about this before, about the lunch waves, but can you put 2 grades in a lunch wave? Is there space to put 2 grades in a lunch wave?
So I can tell you right now from my own personal experience that some lunch waves already include multiple grades. It's really just about like the student capacity. So the separating of the gym and cafeteria question is like really about if there are more students within the school, can the cafeteria handle the lunch waves without interrupting the gym? Like that is like the biggest impetus for why you would need to.
Yeah.
So that question would kind of get to that answer, if we ask that question.
And the multipurpose room that is in a plan to be bumped out to be used as a gym, was it bumped out because that would be an appropriate size for a gym? And it probably wouldn't be an appropriate size for a gym with the existing walls. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
Going back to the point that I was making, yesterday, right?
It was 2 days ago.
2 days ago. 2 days ago. These days are really long. One of the things that I would like to know is if we went back to the way we were having languages, or at least one language, if having theater, having all of the things that we used to have and that made this so great when my kids were here. Do we have room for that? Space room, like capacity.
Yeah. So the way that I'm thinking about that question right now, if everybody wants to ask that question, I'm happy to put that in there. It was not included, space for those types of programs that we don't offer were not part of the requests that went back to SPA right now for the purposes of understanding the.
I did ask about it in
Yeah.
the meetings, but it was told that we don't offer world language anymore, so no.
So I would essentially take that up with the Board of Ed. But for the purposes of what we're trying to assume, I would assume that's a no. Again, if everybody feels that we should be asking that, I'm happy to add that to the list of questions.
I'm thumbs up on asking.
What?
I think we should
I
ask.
think we should ask.
Okay,
And I think, back to one of the things that we said in the beginning, to remind us, this is about looking out 20 years from now.
right.
Yeah.
And to not have language as part of our program is a temporary blip, because of the way that we were offering it wasn't doing the job that it should do.
Yeah.
So I would definitely put that into the,
Okay.
yeah.
As
the
far
long
as-
term.
As far as I know, the room that was being used for languages is now being used by a member of the staff as their office. If you repurpose the multi-purpose room with the stage and everything, then where would you hold the plays?
In most of the scenarios I shared, there is a stage included.
Right,
It was given the gym into.
Yeah, typically, I think
we're kind of-
gym, it could be jam packed, depending on the scenario.
but then don't they have all the lights and everything and the curtain and?
Yeah, and you can include all that in a project like that.
Okay.
I'm typically showing a platform, because that's typically what's in elementary schools now, where they don't go a full-on stage, 3 feet
Right.
high, it's usually 18 inches. So it's a
Okay.
little more simplified.
I didn't realize that grant that we received with Canton was to, I understand it's to hopefully bring back some of those children
Yes,
that are being outplaced now.
yeah,
I didn't realize it was to expand the program
that's what I'm saying. I don't,
and how much that 500,000 that we have to share with them, and they'll probably get the bulk of it. Well, what happens to, how long is that grant good for? I mean, is it good for just one year?
We can't talk about that tonight because we don't have any information. Jeff was very clear the other night that we don't know, like, the details of like what actually goes into that would be part of that. The purpose of it, in my understanding, was to bring the life skills, particularly the life skills component back into the district. That's what the grant was for. It was just awarded the other day, but the details about allocations
Okay.
and like what the underlying proposal was, we don't have that information and I can't speculate.
Because we've gotten grants before and they've been good for a year and we've hired people and then all of a sudden the grant disappears.
Yeah.
And somehow it magically appears in our budget the following year.
I understand what you're saying, but it's not productive for us to have that conversation. There is an allocation within that grant. Again, the details for the grant that was awarded are online. It was part of a press release. Our grant was awarded, again, joint to Canton and New Hartford. There's an allocation for programming and an allocation for like physical space. I don't remember the word they used for it, but like.
Programming is 328,660 and capital improvement is 171 and change for a total of 500.
So was it listed just under Canton? Because I think I
It's a
briefly saw
it's a
that.
Canton.
It's Canton/New Hartford, so
Oh,
under
okay.
the Cs.
I just went to the end. So I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
no, that's, yeah.
Okay.
But the 328 is between the two towns, not just eight
The
towns.
500K between two towns.
I think that what was said during the Board of Ed meeting is that the bulk of the capital improvement dollars are for New Hartford, but there's many details that are still to be worked on,
Right.
so.
So regardless of that, we still want to understand from the Board of Ed what they see as the path forward on special ed. I just mentioned that because it came up the other night, but even if we didn't get that, we still want to ask that question, even if we didn't get that grant.
Yeah, while we're still struggling with our space needs, like, that should be part of the whole mix of what gets decided. And not just, let's just add in, and then, okay, now we're short on maybe doing something that we could have done before. You know, like, it should be part of the whole decision-making process.
I want to get to like a very specific question for this, so I want to make sure that for that question I'm encompassing, like, specifically world language and theaters, but
Are we, from a process perspective, do we have to hash out all the questions here in this meeting, or can we work over, say, the coming week, next board of Ed meeting is on September, can we submit questions to you as the chair offline, and then you aggregate those?
I can,
I'm just trying to get, like, if we can, we're gonna discuss topics, we're actually,
To me, just to kind of add to that, to me, I've been taking a look at, I love the negatives of some of the spaces that we look at, and within it has some of the programming things of like, okay, if we do this scenario versus that scenario, we lose certain programs within that. So that kind of gives us some direction as to what to ask them from my perspective too. It's like, we know scenario, whatever, I'm gonna make up the B2.
Yeah.
We lose programming space, or like A5 is as is, and that we know what we keep and what we don't, but the others really had very specific programs attached to what would no longer be included. So I think that's where we need their opinion, right, is to kind of weigh down as we look at our options, are these programming lacks important to the Board of Ed?
I understand what both of you are saying. I'm just trying to think about the mechanics of doing this in a way that like gets everybody's input. The way you word that question might be different from the way somebody else words that question. We have different interpretations of that. I also want to be mindful of like what kind of questions we're putting in front of the Board of Ed in terms of like how quickly they would be able to come to a determination collectively across a 9-member board so that we're not dragging this part of the process out forever. And that's like, again, I know it's a very practical thing. I want to get to the right answers here. But that's what I'm struggling right now while trying to think about how to do what you guys are suggesting and like get through that without adding another meeting for us to like review the questions. Because if we deliver them a list of 20 questions from everybody sitting here, like, it's not gonna be feasible to like get those 20 questions answered collectively with all of the follow-up questions that other Board of Ed members are gonna have about all of that here. Like, I think there needs to be an acceptance at some point that we're not going to have all of the details
Agreed.
necessary.
So it-
Yeah,
But it just, I guess in be like, if a group of people submit a bunch of questions like by email, then there's, you know, I would have, if I'm able to help, happy to help, but just as chair to, you know, here are themes, here are related questions, group them, they not be perfectly in each individual person's question, but we're touching on those themes. I'm just worried that if we, A, spend time here in this meeting, there's gonna be things we don't think of, and B, it's gonna be a lot of time to actually frame the questions here. So can we surface themes or agree to submit questions to you over a certain period that we then,
I'm happy to do that work. But I would need, like, I'm not going to be able to have, like, we're not gonna be able to pull that together and have a discussion as a group before I like finalize that and like send it off to people. That's outside what we are allowed to do in terms of operating in public, is my understanding here. So like, I'm not sure that, like, if I'm just collecting questions, that's administrative. But if I'm exercising judgment or like asking anybody else for input, that's outside of what we can be doing. So my request would be, I'm concerned about that because if everybody sends me 3 questions, I don't have the authority to just say, I'm only asking these questions. If it does wind up that they're not like really consolidated into like easy themes.
In my
You understand what I'm
mind,
saying?
if we know the major questions, which sounds like there are 5 of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah,
and were pretty good questions.
yeah.
Right,
We go with what we got, and if something else comes up, and I can't imagine it'd be more than 1 or 2 bigger things,
Yeah.
we can add that later.
Because we basically have 4 options of our school scenarios right now.
Yeah.
Each of those options
Yeah.
has 2 to 3 drawbacks.
Yeah.
So I think we just really need to consolidate the drawbacks
Yeah.
into an organized
Yeah.
category. Special ed is additional intervention space important. And have them kind of, they're not gonna be able to say
Yeah.
yes or no. We don't want them to have to go to committee to figure this all out and add a whole complexity, but just
right,
is expanding the life skills program important to the
Right.
Board of Ed?
Right.
Is adding intervention space important? Cafeteria already mentioned with the gyms, but I think we have these already.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
we've collected them.
I agree. I want to also, I think, address what you were just saying a couple of minutes ago regarding the Board of Ed's opinion about the drawbacks of the existing programming, the way it works in the schools. Because I will be very honest with you, I don't think we would have to sit through that whole programming presentation with them for them to truly grasp it, right? Like in terms of like where all of that is. And we can certainly, I think we should do that, right? Like part of what I've also been thinking about is like how are we going to present our recommendations and like what additional context would the Board of Ed need to kind of make a decision from there? So I do anticipate that being something that they would have to go through because I just think even being on the Board of Ed and knowing there were limitations, I did not understand the complexity in detail of it until we sat through that presentation. So I would be uncomfortable just kind of like firing off a question, being like, do you think that, you know, the way things work right now across these like 15 different axes of programming like are beneficial or not? Like it would be a real struggle for anybody to just answer that in the context of one meeting. And again, I'm not like, yeah, I'm just trying to think about how we can like move things forward in terms of what we can do, what's there, like the Board of Ed, where I'm sort of at right now, that my expectation is that we would send over like, you know, more than, we're gonna send over the baseline, would send over one, possibly like, you know, prioritize 1, 2 choices of like what we're seeing. And then be like, here's all of the data we have that like got us to this conclusion, like, and we're happy to like walk you through it, but like, they're gonna need to work through some of that before they decide what to do from there. Because they're gonna have their own questions about all of the stuff we've looked at as well. I know everybody wants to like move a decision, like, you know, not like drag this out as much as possible, but like there will be that body of work that the Board of Ed would need to do. And I think that when this was part of the discussion we had the other night, I'm looking back over to you guys too, to like make sure that what I'm talking about reflects your understanding too. Our purpose was to help gather data and to look at all of the factors and understand what's going on and be able to make sure that we have a cohesive story to tell that is like as clear as it can be to get them to a place where it's like, here's what we know, here is the clean thing. That is what was missing from the last process. We are getting to a really good place with that. But there are things that we as a task force cannot answer, that the Board of Ed would really have to wrestle with before making any recommendation or any budget requests to the town if any of this work would to go forward.
It sounds like maybe we need a good summary of all the data to present to the Board of Ed.
Yeah, and that's what I'm just trying to figure out how I can, partner with Michelle or like partner, here trying to get some of that together. I do want to think about, outside of all of this, that's why I want to make sure that we have all of the questions that we feel like we can reasonably answer on our list, right? We kind of walk through that. What answers do we need to feel like we can at least say, this is what we understand, this is what we recommend, but here's all of the data that goes into that and there. So I want to think about how we're presenting that data, how we're presenting that recommendation, but like get to a point where, this is as far as we can go
So
with the recommendations.
I understand that you want to give them data. The question that kept coming up the other night when you were talking about this as a general concept was, well, I would have to know how much that cost. I would have to know how much that cost.
Yeah.
And really, what we need to say, the way I'm looking at it is we can't say how much that will cost until we can form the options. So what we need are just them to help us answer questions that we have in forming the options.
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily mean giving them a book, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that
100%.
we could complicate it very easily.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to, we've got numbers based off of what we know right now. Again, when we've been talking about like what work could be done, Mr. Lloyd has brought up like the civil engineering analysis that would need to be done at any site. Like I would almost at this point, like say, here are our recommendations, Board of Ed, before we strongly recommend that like if you start to go down the path that you spend the money to do a civil engineering study at like one of the, whatever sites we're really looking at there before you make it to final determination. So again, that's the board, I don't want to pay for that right now. If what?
Can we discuss that topic?
Yeah, sure, we can.
So are we gonna discuss, should we agree for a process perspective? Should we stay focused on getting these questions together and then come back to this engineering topic during this discussion?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or do you wanna, I don't know. So then I would like to make a motion that we as a task force recommend to the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen that they proceed with civil, structural, and environmental analyses. I'm not saying boring and extensive work, but on the order of a $10,000 price tag across those three. So a day of work or so per each. Ideally to look at 2 sites. If they can include Bakerville, okay, but mostly people are at Bakerville. So I can make a motion that we actually formally request the boards to pursue environmental analyses, civil, structural, and environmental in the coming month to 6 weeks so we can actually have information to proceed.
So there's a motion on the floor. Would anybody like to second John's motion before we discuss it? Carrie will second for discussion. Okay.
I'm sorry, that was a wordy motion.
That's
but-
okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there. It's on the recording. Is it your intention that that work get done prior to us making a recommendation?
Yes,
Prior to September's meeting?
no,
Prior to when?
I would,
Would you
I'm not
like to have it
sure.
done?
I'm not sure, maybe during public comment, we can get some perspective on how fast that could happen, but as I look at this, it's a critical item that can materially change the viability and the cost of the options we're considering. So for us to make a recommendation to the Board of Education without that, at least Board of Education needs to do that. Time is money here. If the town does not want to proceed with that, then the town can choose that. But for us not to flag that as a critical item that needs information soon puts this whole effort in a place that we know is subpar.
Questions? Do you have a backup for how much money you're asking for?
He said 10,000.
Yeah.
No, I know, where did you come up with that number?
Previously, Michelle, but you added a lot of stuff to that.
You're
So
way-
I believe, yeah. But previously, as part of our open action items question, we had talked about the civil engineering piece in particular. And Michelle had previously quoted me that that's like very, very ballpark, like probably $8,000 per site for a civil analysis. You
Yeah,
mentioned
and it
2 other
wasn't-
ones.
It wasn't exactly what I think you might be looking for either. This was more, I'm gonna pull up that email so I can read that.
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
trying to build from public comment during the Board of Education meeting, when it was noted that having a light walkthrough, and maybe we could allow the public to speak on this topic, to actually comment on what could be done here for a ballpark $10,000 figure. It needs to be higher, but again, trying to have a discussion here about not a $50,000 or $100,000 price tag. And also, I've been doing all the, not to bring it to me, but I've been doing all the videography, so we have, I think, a few $1,000s right there that the boards have already approved, that hasn't been used. So that's at least one portion of the funding that could be used toward this environmental study. Sorry, environmental engineering study.
Was it 10,000 per school or 10,000 total?
I'll tell you what I kind of got a quote for. So this is reaching out to one of our civil engineers, and he quoted me ballpark, without knowing anything about your sites, probably about $8,000 to create base mapping using available online aerial information, site visit and document all existing conditions, an existing conditions narrative to incorporate with our report, but he doesn't know we already did our report. Preparation of a concept plan to address conditions and operational deficiencies, and one meeting with the building committee or with you all to present it. So I don't think that's
That
really
sounds
what
like a
you're
lot
looking
more than, that's a lot heavier than what, so I'm not the expert here. We've heard from one in our meetings, including today's Board of Ed meeting. Have tried to do some independent perspective from other sources, which I'm not gonna say that I'm qualified, but it seems that on the order of maybe $20,000 for a budget ask, and then we can proceed in town to figure out what's needed. But the point is, it's not 50 or 100, it's a, big but small amount of money. We're talking about $50+ million project here. To have that information sooner rather than later can materially change cost numbers and even the options we're considering. So that's why I'm trying to figure out what might work here. Again, if we can have public comment or ask, allow Mr. Lloyd to speak, maybe we get some information that can help us right there if he wants to speak. But again, I think that there's experts who could help us out for a relatively reasonable amount of money and give us a lot of information over the next month to 6 weeks.
I have a question, and maybe Mr. Lloyd could help answer this, but for us to get value out of that money that we spend, how much detail do we have to have in our proposed design?
Can we allow Mr. Lloyd to speak?
Anybody open to hearing from Mr. Lloyd, who had brought this up at several meetings here and also came to the board.
I mean, that's what I want to know, is are we at the point where we could get value from spending that money with the point we're at in this process?
I would strongly say yes, and I would want to hear from,
Can I get clarification? Is everybody here comfortable for
Yeah,
asking
that's
Mr. Lloyd to speak and weigh in on this?
If he has something that he feels he can offer, sure.
So you've already done this process with your architect. Your architect has done a simple one, or not necessarily one day, but a short walkthrough of the existing site, any more than 3. They have not opened any walls, they haven't taken any samples, they've simply walked through, noted what they saw, prepared a report, reviewed existing drawings that were provided by you, went to public databases like the GIS, looked at it, and all the data that you have is their opinion of looking at it. There's no sampling, no drilling, no demolitions, no testing. It's a professional observation, which is why you have a consultant. For some reason, you don't have those services included in the current RFP. And I may use your name, Michelle. It's been very clear that they are not included in the RFP, which means they are not included in the costing. You could use publicly available data, perhaps from the state, to guess at those values, but they're not specific to your site. It does not take a consultant on a single specialty that long relatively to walk through in one day these 3 small sites and provide you, looking at the information, that the same information has been provided already to the architect, the existing condition drawings, to pick up the phone and call the Farmington Valley Health District and find out what the septic and water systems are, and provide you with a 1 or 2 page summary of his professional observations and recommendations as to what you might want to consider going forward. That's it. And that's exactly, in a much smaller case, because it's much more focused, that your consultant has already done for you under the architectural, mechanical, and plumbing and electrical fields. So Michelle's scope of work, if I understood it correctly, and I'm just hearing what you're saying, is significantly more involved, or what the individual is proposing is significantly more involved than somebody basically walking through a space, using their expertise, looking at the documents that are provided by you as the owner and saying, yep, this is what you got, this is what you have to look out for. And by the way, since there's a septic system and a well, I went to the Farmington Valley Health District, which has it all on file. I looked at that. I looked at publicly available soil maps for the area, looked at that. This is what it looks like. These are the things you should think about. And with that information, then you can maybe add dollars to it or adjust it, but more importantly, under your costing, and I'm going to remind you that these are probable costs, not cost estimates, you can put together a set of assumptions. You can assume, and again, you have a consultant who can advise you that based upon their experience, it is reasonable to assume this or not, or maybe not that. And on the basis of that assumption, you can then recommend to the school board that whatever option you're looking at, the school board should assume, pending further investigation, that this might be a problem. We might need 25 more wells, who knows? Something like that. And that is the point. Not the exact number, because not one number that you guys are looking at has any validity. It is a bucket that you are getting to set relative details. And so this will fill that gap and give you some confidence that when you talk about working in sites, on rock, on wetlands, on a building that has a foundation crack, on a 100-year-old building that has single width brick walls, that you're not going to uncover 6 years from now a very expensive modification because nobody thought to ask the question. That's all it is. And to that end, I think, if you allocate $10,000, you see where you go. The reason it's civil is obviously site, the reason it's structural is obvious, but you need to have quick environmental assessment, same thing. You actually have one of the major environmental firms resident in this town. You probably don't know that. They will, same thing, you walk through, it's like, yeah, we've done 1 million of these buildings and you need to watch out for this, this, and this. And I read your demolition reports, it looks like you got it all, but you should consider allocating some money for that. And that's all it is, it's a single line item. Add it to your stuff, and then when it goes to the next stage, everybody can look at it and they have a piece of paper that everybody can agree or disagree on. But right now, you have nothing that people can agree or disagree on. So that's my advice to you and my recommendation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
So I have a question. One of the probably most obvious one is ledge back here. You gotta be thinking you're gonna run into ledge. We already know that. Would there be more than what you said? Would you have to find out what it would really take to do it? Would you have to do borings and take it to the next level or not?
This building's built on ledge.
Yeah.
You already have that data. So you look at the design drawings and a structural and civil engineer looks at it and says, it's reasonable to assume based upon my walk that the ledge condition exists. I recommend to the architect that you make the following provisions. You're done. When you get to the point, past this point, when you guys submit your recommendation, the board then makes a selection and then selects a design architect, the very first thing that's going to happen is site exploration and one of those. But now it's totally premature because you don't know what you're going to do, but you have enough information because this building is built on ledge. And believe me, 3/4 of the building in the state are built on ledge. In fact, it's great if you don't have to do a basement, the rock doesn't move, you get the right stuff.
So the same question would be on the water for New Hartford or the floodplain, so that would also be included,
That's why you want the
Yeah.
civil to look at the wetlands, the floodplains,
the
the
ledge.
100-year, the 200-year flood cases in terms of New Hartford Elementary, recent federal guideline changes. New Hartford Elementary, I believe, is now on the aquarium system, so that takes aquarium out of, takes it out of the water supply and sanitary questions. But those still apply up here.
Yeah.
And again, this is my opinion. Welcome to do with it as you please.
Do you have any thoughts?
I always love civil on our jobs.
Yeah.
We often have them, most of the time. Seldomly, and a few will have, hazardous material surveys done.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do have structural. So, and structural, I'll tell you, the last study we did, they did come out, and theirs was also around 10,000 after the fact, when they did an assessment of the structure. It was a specific assessment to study if we could add on top of the building.
Yeah.
So I'm gauging that they would be around the same price point or so.
Carrie, I'm looking to you because you were on the interview process for helping find a consultant right now. And I'm wondering if you have any context for, like, was there any discussion about like this body of work during those interviews of whether or not it like should or should not be included, or was it just going off, like, was that just not included in the RFP? I can't recall.
No, it was not included, but
Okay.
because I don't think, we were going from no data to how do we gather data to start making a decision.
Yeah.
Knowing that this was going to be the start of the process, not the, here you go, this is what we're doing now.
It wasn't evaluated and excluded for any reason that you are aware of?
No.
Okay.
You know, and I'll give an example, we did, I mean, we added to the population study, because that wasn't on the original quote, so we had to prove getting that added to it, because it was important and necessary. So I think there's things that we'll have to present to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance that are coming out of this as we're stuck making decisions because we don't know these core things. But I think those core things have to be very specific and outlined with the request. Otherwise, it's just asking for more money to get more data.
I'm just wondering if we need to narrow the options down a little bit, so we don't have them looking at things that we don't really think we would do. In my mind, it would be Bakerville, maybe that's just me. But there's gotta be some that we would say, no, we're just not gonna do that, so.
Well, yeah, so I'm agreeing, that's why I wasn't sure about a walkthrough of Bakerfield, it's even worthwhile. But one question does seem to keep coming up, the ledge here, but also in New Hartford Elementary having the floodplain, but also just that single brick wall, as John was mentioning there's concerns about building onto that, which leads to talking some of the tuck-ins, or trying to do an extension to it. There's some questions that came up there. So if we were thinking about from the most recent presentation, and we have the 5 options, the first one is maintain existing. So it seems like we've got mainly 2 sites for these options. And so it'd be focusing on what are the key questions we need answered from these 3 engineering disciplines to help us with these. So I don't know all the questions. I'm not an expert in this space, but it seems just a small amount of money to obtain, get primary service data. The whole point of what we're doing to run our process here, we have a very important missing piece right now that's going to become more important as we move forward. So, edging into those waters now seems to be prudent, which is why I was wanting to bring this up as a discussion.
Just a quick comment, maybe a little easier. It's a unique condition right now. You actually have a very complete architectural report. And that can be given to these other consultants, and they can tell you it's not worth looking at Bakerville. Or you should look at Bakerville. I mean, that's the point, before they even go in the field. Because unlike most cases, I think Michelle would agree, you can give the sub-consultant a pretty large block of information that they can start with, as opposed to a blank sheet, which saves them time and will probably save you money. And I mean, personally, I wouldn't waste my time on Bakerville either. That's my call, not my call. But what's different here is whoever you talk to, you have the existing information that the architect's already developed, that gets presented, and that will help them come back, and they will probably give you some information that you might not expect, particularly on the structural side.
Didn't we already vote
No,
to take the Bakerville option out of the table?
Just two of them out of the three.
2 out of 3. What's the
Option A,
option of
maintaining. Or, yeah, A. I'm getting
I can't-
risky.
No,
A5 is maintaining. Come
Yeah,
on.
A. Renovate is the bigger though. Yep.
So some information from Bakerville could be helpful in theory, but again, I don't know where our scope actually falls out. The biggest questions seem to be elsewhere, but again, but John's saying if there's a quick answer that could be helpful, low cost, even with Bakerville, seems prudent.
You know, remember that your architect is in charge of commenting upon the general condition of the building. If I'm making this up, just so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth at all. I'm a Connecticut licensed professional engineer, I can help you use it.
Yes, I got
She's perfectly capable, if I may use your name directly, of directing the civil, saying, you know, we've already determined that this piece in this building is completely useless or is perfectly reusable. Well, that information to a sub-consultant allows them to direct their energies appropriately. It's not for me to say what they should say, but like I said, you're in a rather unique position here where you have to actually have your lead consultant who's done a major portion of the work, which is significant help to adding these people on at a later date.
Yeah, we would typically, if they came on board, probably the engineers and I would kind of run through the report with them, show them what we found and kind of take them through where we are. And then they would add on to that.
But they would know really where to be precise about getting the detail, the gap in detail, yeah.
And the focus that.
Yeah.
And based on what you just said, this wouldn't include going to the extent of doing borings at this point. So.
No, because
Yeah.
again, your architect has done no invasive work.
Right,
You know,
right,
nobody's being asked to do that.
right,
This
just
is not
wanted
the
to
scope of the work.
clarify
Yeah.
that, thank you.
You
Okay.
really don't want to do warrants until you
Yeah.
know what you're really doing.
Right, right.
But let me give you a simple example that is in Michelle's document. They're gonna look at the picture of the Bakerville crack foundation, and the structural engineer is going to have an opinion right there.
Okay.
I don't know what that opinion is.
Okay.
But he's going to, that's the first thing, if you tell him to look at Bakerville, that is the first spot. I had structural engineering in my old firm. That's the first spot he's gonna visit.
Okay.
So you're gonna know right away if he thinks it's worth it. So that's why she's already just generated an awful lot of information. It's very helpful to these possible other consultants.
So it's another team member.
Yes, basically,
Yeah.
it's kind of more of a full team at that point.
And do you have people that you, like, how would we go out to RFP?
We
Like,
can make
we would be
recommendations,
able to-
there's
Okay.
Typical firms we work with.
Okay. So your suggestion is max 10,000 as, in terms of the request?
I mean, maybe I should go higher, give us some flex.
I mean, we can get some proposals and just go
Yeah.
from there also. you know.
Okay,
Maybe the motion is then you get
Change the motion.
proposals, and then we decide from there.
okay.
But you're also aware of our budget constraints and the scope here,
Yeah,
and
well, why don't we vote on your motion? It was first, it was second, and you have to vote on the motion, then you can make another motion.
okay, so then,
we never voted on the motion.
yeah, so
We have to vote first on that one before we can make any others.
So we can vote it down, but then vote up.
exactly, yeah, so I can vote it down and then make a new one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for your guidance.
So then all in favor? All not in favor?
Is there any additional motions on the
Yes.
floor?
So, sound like I would motion that we work with Michelle to request proposals for civil, structural, and environmental analyses,
Evaluation.
evaluations, thank you, for, should I say three, is it would be, might have a question about Bakerville, so three
I think we
sites.
need to look at all three sites
Yeah.
again for full
Yeah.
Yeah, for three
transparency
sites.
and
We can almost choose just to do two.
Exactly,
after we
but
get
the
the-
three to keep, yeah, so
Yeah.
the three disciplines, the three sites, evaluations.
Right.
Okay,
So structural, environmental, and civil.
yes,
I'll second it.
Motion, I was gonna say.
Second, okay, that motion was made by John, who seconded by Alicia.
No, Penny.
Oh, Penny, seconded by Penny. Any further discussion?
So you said structural, environmental, and civil.
yes.
That's the three things we've been talking about.
I thought we were just talking about civil.
Structural is different from civil. So structural is going to talk about the building above ground,
Okay.
civil is going to talk about the ground below, and environmental is, in this particular case, going to focus on, I would imagine, contaminants in the building predominantly, PCBs, leads, molds, and asbestos. And it's probably the lightest one.
I reviewed your O'Hara reports, which do have some things noted. They would come in and do a deeper level. I don't know if we want to ask for testing specifically, it's just visual surveillance.
No, my opinion is the only thing you need to do is to have them confirm it or walk through to actually do a site visit, which Michelle cannot do.
Okay.
And the reason that you need to have that is called out in the Board of Ed meeting where you spent some ARPA money to do a remediation, spot remediation. You cannot, whatever work you do on whatever building you do, you will uncover something.
Right.
But having somebody walk through the building and say, my experience tells me, even if it's not on this report, that when you open the wall, because the document's the time, you will probably see X, Y, and Z, allows you to include in your report to the school
So
board
it's just a
education.
walkthrough.
Be aware this is a possibility, and maybe we should carry an allowance of X number of
And that
times.
does precisely.
Which I did put that allowance in,
There
but
is
I was
some-
kind of.
But there is some,
Remember,
Yes, okay.
I mean, all respect to the architect, that is not their purview or their licensure or anything, it's simply an
Yeah,
opinion.
we don't normally put an allowance in, we just will flag items that we know typically have been associated with it.
Okay.
Like,
and so in the,
knowing what I knew, I felt it was
Yeah.
important to put in.
and you did, and that shows there, but it's, I mean, there's several $1 million in the facility conditions report that are tied to those sort of contingencies, so I mean, it's a real topic, and so I mean, if it's more or less, that's good to know, and so, but it's low cost from what we've heard.
Yeah.
So the three disciplines, the three sites, requesting proposals, evaluation.
and then we'll vote on a decision once those proposals come in
Exactly.
of where to move forward.
So, yeah,
And when's the next meeting?
Oh, we got both.
yeah,
Sorry,
Yeah.
jump in.
September 9th, if it's voted to have.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay. I want to revisit the list of questions.
Yeah.
Because we
And I think
went off on
some,
a huge tangent in that.
and I think that tangent actually helped us focus back in a different way. So I think on that same, looking at those three things to the three sites, I think we should probably just highlight the top questions we have, and that's second grade, right? Would they consider moving second grade?
Yeah.
I think the same thing, I think you brought up, that pre-K, would they consider changing the pre-K format? Like, are those even for debate to the board?
Yeah.
I think there's just some big questions that we could get them to answer that is not where they're headed or would not consider that.
So I will rehash the questions that I have listed out just for like everybody here. One is the gym cafeteria separation a must-have if we consolidate schools. Two, how many pre-K classrooms should be planned for when we're looking at this? Three, should bringing special education, outplaced special education services back in-house where possible be included in our assumptions. Four, is the board open to changing the grade structure of the schools? That's the pre-K through 1 versus like where like moving second grade around. 5, Is the board going to prioritize separate art and music spaces versus the combined spaces we have now? And then 6 is, does the board anticipate bringing back any programs such as world languages, theater? Is there anything else that should be specified in that ask?
I don't know if right now they also have, they used to have, like a choral group. I don't know if they have now.
They still, yeah, they have a course.
Do they have that? They have a chorus? Okay. So, because they had 2 music teachers, yeah. Do they still have 2 music teachers?
I can clarify that.
I think so, at Antolini only.
So art, music combined room, that was on that list, right?
What, sorry?
Yeah.
The art, music was on that.
Yes.
And theater.
And theater.
So those are 2 separate questions. So one question is about, right now, the art and music programs exist in the schools, but they are, in Bakerville and New Hartford Elementary, they are utilizing combined spaces.
Also for health.
What?
Also for health.
Also for health, thank you.
Wow.
So the one question is that, like, is it a priority to have separate spaces for each of those programs that already exist? And then the secondary question is about intention to bring programming that was previously lacked back into the district if they want to plan for that. And that is the world languages, theater, and potentially chorus.
As examples, yeah,
What?
as examples.
Well, that's why I want to be very clear about, like, the way we're wording the questions, because we can't just say, or like anything else like that, because then people are gonna be like, well, what's the possibility of things, and,
I think one of the things is to bring the school into the future, not just keep it as is or backwards. But put it into the future.
Current century is the word, future proofing, and there's different words we use.
Yeah, so the way that we talked about the other night again was just sort of like, right now, the space standard is the maximum program, but I'm gonna push back again on that, because there's 2 separate things there, right? The programming expansions that we're looking at right now are only looking at like better fits with like programming layers that exist within the school right now. And you're asking about adding stuff back in, which again is a separate question.
But it's important that we know whether to consider that or not, because if the board doesn't have the intention to bring us into the future, but just to stay the way we are, which is a few steps back from what used to be. So we need to know that in order to decide how much space we need.
So I think what I'm having a hard time with just saying, like, does the board intend to like future-proof the schools? And I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting what you're asking for, but like, that to me is too broad of a question. And like, the only answer we're going to get is like, we would like to do that, but there are limitations in terms of cost and what the town can afford and so on and so forth. So I don't think that's going to be, like, having a broad question like that is challenging to get any useful information back on. That's sort of what I'm trying to troubleshoot right now, why I'm trying to make the questions more concrete and specific about, like, these are some considered trade-offs right now that we know we're looking at within the programming, and like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, indeed. Future-proofing, generally speaking, I don't know, like, that could be anything.
Right, but is that we are talking about just bringing it back to where it was, that was more than what we have now.
But even asking that question, we're asking about long-term planning. And that is that may or may not be something the Board of Education is doing right now. But it's not, they can't take that question and just answer it. That's like, long-term planning takes a lot.
Realistically speaking, the kind of answer, like, the best answer you're gonna get for that is that as new things arise, we would have to evaluate those things on a case-by-case basis.
But if we already are just making the space exactly what we have right now, then there is no room for expansion at all.
When they had Spanish before, was it just Spanish? Did we
Yes.
have just
Yes.
Spanish?
Yeah.
And it was initially 5th and 6th grade, and then it went to just 6th grade, right?
Yes.
Yes.
But because the other towns that feed into Region 7 do not offer Spanish,
Yeah.
when the children went from here up to there, they were just repeating what they had already learned here again for first year at regional.
Well,
But it's not our problem that the other schools don't offer it. We're offering it. We should offer it to our children.
but it was a budget consideration, right? Like that was what it was. It was like, we have all of these needs from a budget perspective. And so, again, when we're in those meetings on the budget and making trade-offs, right now, the trade-off then was not that we don't value world languages in the school. It was that right now, our students are not getting long-term value from it, because like, from a prioritization perspective, it was like, well, yes, we need more of like this other thing that was the competing priority. And our students right now have to repeat Spanish when they go up a grade. So like, that's the way that conversation like wound up happening at the budget level. And so it wasn't we don't value that. It's just in the grand scheme of things and everything else that we need to prioritize, we would rather cut Spanish than cut maybe like another teacher or something. Like, I don't remember what the actual piece was there.
So in an ideal world, Carmen is right.
Right.
She's absolutely right. But we have to look at what we ask for, kind of in the perspective you just talked about, is how much, I mean, how big can you go with this? You know, I mean,
Right.
So I mean, I think that if we are starting to ask those kinds of questions about expanding what outside of the existing program, I feel like we're going out of the bounds of our task. Yeah. Even though I think she's right.
Yeah.
I think.
I understand the motivation behind trying to get to an answer on that. And I think that, some of this is about, again, to what it was the current status, or like 21st century schools or something, that concept of like, that's looking at like, if we built a school now, what would we do? How would we evaluate the space? Like what kind of like programming would we put into it? All of those kind of things. But asking hypotheticals about like programs that don't exist right now and aren't like an immediate need that we're looking to bring back, I think is too esoteric for the purposes of what we can actually do. I think you should separately have a lot of passion for this. Like you could talk to the Board of Ed about that separately from this, but in terms of what the task force needs to move forward, I have a hard time trying to figure out how we can even get to that.
Right, but if the Board of Education gives us a yes, you should also look into a possible one other room where we can do this. Add this other space for this other program,
Right.
then we are not going to be, I'm not talking about a major expansion. It's just like to add 1 or 2 rooms, to have that in consideration, because we cannot just stay in one box and stay there. There were things that existed before, and we don't have them now for whatever considerations.
Yeah.
So at least bring us back to what we had before.
But I believe we had more students in the school when we had Spanish, and we were able to fit it somehow. So I think it's not out of the realm to add Spanish back in within the existing space. I don't think we need to add space to add Spanish back in.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. The only thing is that we have to make sure that it is true. That's what I am asking.
So 2 thoughts here. One, just looking at our task force webpage, timely and essential that we work together to thoughtfully examine the long-term direction of our school district and considering factors such as educational program, service delivery, and more. And so, I mean, Karen's point, the worst case is the Board of Ed says no. But to not ask the question here, like, I mean, there's a lot of folks in the community who have asked about Spanish. I can, whether there's additional space or not needed, I mean, I see that point, but I don't see the harm in asking a question to find out, it's not just Spanish, there's other pieces she's looking for as well. So at least to, know this is something that's come up from the task force several times, and then be able to, you know, it's not our prerogative, it's the Board of Education's. And so, again, worst case, they say no, don't, and okay, you know, it's been asked, you can still run with the meeting, but I don't see the harm.
What you're trying to do is figure out how to get it to be a focused question.
Yeah,
So
I'm
maybe
not-
we just leave it as
I'm
basic
not
as would
like-
language program be of a program significance to the Board of Ed at this point in terms of a long-term ad?
Yeah, is there any plan to consider bringing back the language
Yeah,
program?
like as a, yeah.
But there are services that are previously offered, that are not currently offered. As you think about the future, would any of those services be considerations or factors to think about?
But that's what I'm at, that's the question I have here. Does the Board of Ed anticipate bringing back any programs such as world languages or theater?
Right, yeah.
Right,
That is the question that I started this with,
that's fine.
just to be very clear.
Yes.
So if there's a different request to word that or other considerations there, but like, that's as concrete as I can get.
Yes,
Okay.
I would agree with that as a
Okay.
very direct question.
And just looking like at my spreadsheet for Antonini, like maybe there's an opportunity there to like share with the health, you know, world language
Do you want to
health, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, generic.
What it was before is the teacher came into the classroom. My
That's an
daughter did
option
it. The
too, yeah.
teacher came
That's
into the
just
classroom
makes
and
sense.
taught while the teacher was taking a break doing something else. So the Spanish teacher didn't require the kids to move. They just came into the existing
Right,
space
so-
where the kids were at.
To the point also about like what our remit is here. Again, I'm happy to put this question in here, but if that's the way the program was administered, then when we're looking at the way the buildings are used, it doesn't matter whether or not
Spatially.
Spanish would be coming back, Spanish in particular, right? Same thing when you're thinking about theater, if there is a stage
It's just getting
planned
into the
for
closet.
within one of the things,
All
then
the
like
stuff
a
that
theater
comes-
program doesn't need a dedicated space to come back beyond that for this level. But what Michelle is saying is that schools don't build auditoriums like that for special purposes. They're just putting platforms into like a larger space
In
that's
an
already
elementary
existed.
Yeah.
So that's like, to me, that's a little bit of the difference too, between like asking about art and music and health, because all of those are combined spaces right now, where like there is value in having a special purpose room for art to deal with the mess, for music to deal with the noise, and health I feel a little bit
So
like,
where would you put theater, or where would you put, a language, a world language?
The language comes, so I think the other thing we've got to be in weigh in on this with, it's elementary school, the more you move kids, like in elementary school, you don't want kids walking through hallways. It's actually really, it's harder to get kids to move versus you're thinking of like middle school, high school, they rotate through lots of classrooms. The only time that the kids really leave their main classroom is because they need services that aren't allowed or accommodated in those classrooms. So the language comes to the students.
So
The
they-
students don't need to go to a language.
So the teacher would come,
the teacher would possibly have like a workspace within the school to like handle their work and their materials, but when they're doing the education, they would go to the class whose turn it was to have Spanish. And conduct a class. in the
But when my
classroom.
grandson went here 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was a separate classroom, and that's where the Spanish teacher resided.
Probably because
Well,
they had
so
the
I think, but I
core.
think for that, is
Oh,
that.
and now
like-
somebody else is using, a member of the staff
Well,
used
and
it.
that's, like ultimately, like, so what you're actually bringing up is like a really great point here, right? Like, there's not a static use for like every room, every year, right? Like some years there will be like 3 third grade classrooms. Some years there will be 4 third grade classrooms. Like the school needs to have some flexibility year to year to like utilize the appropriate spaces for that. So in the instance of when there was a Spanish classroom, it is possible that there was an empty classroom that didn't need to be repurposed for anything else. We just don't know that right now.
She was,
But there is
that
a-
was, all her room was used for, was Spanish.
I understand what you're saying, but my point is that at that time, it's possible the school had the capacity to deliver the program through a dedicated classroom. But to the point that Carrie is making, it is possible to deliver that program without dedicated space in the school.
Right.
Because you could just go and do that. So again, I think trying to nail them down, like trying to nail the Board of Ed down on that right now is is not material, because Spanish in and of itself would not need a dedicated special purpose space in order for the program to come back.
And like theater could share music, like that could go into the music room, like it doesn't need to be
Also
dedicated space.
presentations, I don't know.
It would be up to the school to figure that out. It's like sort
Right,
of my
but
point.
the question is whether there is room, not to stay in the past, but to be in the present and maybe perhaps a little bit into the future. Because if not, it is like buying a kid a size 5 because the kid right now needs a size 5 shoe, but in the future, the kid is going to have a longer foot and needs perhaps. Maybe the kid is going to stay that way, but maybe not. Maybe it's going to need something else. And it would be nice to have at least a little bit of flexibility. So that's what I'm saying. If we could think of not just limiting to fitting what we have right now, but think a little bit into a little expansion, that would be wonderful. Because then we are not thinking about now, but for the kids in the future, in 10 years, in 15 years from now, 20 years from now.
Well, I think we're getting to that. I think we're looking at a lot of options that have expanded space. That is part of adding things in. How it exactly gets configured is still to be determined.
Well, that's why we are talking about this, to see how we can.
We've got some options that are adding more space.
I also think, and I would actually like to hear like a question for you, because what you're getting at, I think, is partially like when we looked at the programming and like looked at sort of the evolution of the way that the school was used. Part of what you were saying is that like the current model like provides for more flexible spaces within the school to be used for like collaboration or stuff like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? I can pull up the presentation.
The program.
Actually, probably
Right,
have it.
shows evolution, but I don't really know what your question is.
My question is, in terms of the question that Carmen is asking, if we were to like really be looking at that sort of like modernizing within the interior schools, would that kind of thing be like naturally accommodated for within that?
I feel like it's a loaded question.
I know it's a loaded question. Well, that's the thing,
Okay.
they're all loaded
When I
questions.
started programming, I asked about the world language because typically I see world language in a school that has 5 and 6, okay? And typically I do see rooms, there could be a French, a Spanish, depending on the size of the school, there could be, you know what I mean, there could be multiple. I do think it's a program that potentially, because there's only 122, I think, 5th and 6th graders, so I do think it could probably share a space if needed. I'm not answering your question, though, I don't think.
It's this sort of like, I'm just gonna show it to everybody here, this sort of like right here, and like what the theme of like where people are building now is like adaptive ecosystems, right? That kind of like help with like moving people around the schools and like being adaptable within the building versus what we have right now. That's sort of like the theory, that's what I'm like kind of a little bit more talking about, like where we landed on that spectrum in terms of the roadmaps that you're looking at today. And it may not be a fair question, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has some flexibility and it could potentially fit in somehow. I think that part of the problem here is there's a lot of program that doesn't exist right now in your schools and we're adding a ton and it's kind of freaking everybody out. I think it's a great thing to add, both of your comments, and I think they both can kind of work, you know, as Carrie was saying, kind of theater can tie in with the music, it still have a stage, they just need a good closet that really needs to be added in for all of the storage that they would need. And then they can kind of share those spaces. And I think world language could kind of fall into that. I don't know how often health is used, like could they share? Or could it go into the classrooms? I think there could be opportunities, but these are programs that don't exist where they need to hire people. So that's like the bigger question almost.
Right.
But I think as we move forward, if that's something they want to explore, we can begin to add that on and look at that. Especially as this, design or concept, whatever we're doing here is going to develop further and further. Not every little single programmatic thing has to be figured out, but the big picture does. Because you're going to have a lot more months and months more schematic design going through all your options where you can look at adding these things. So I don't think we should get hung up on one classroom, but I think it's all important stuff, and I think your question kind of hits on it.
I agree.
Next question?
Huh?
Next
That was the
one.
last
Is it-
question, unless somebody has other questions that you.
No, I looked through and just while we we're going through, it looks like most of the big things are addressed in that.
And I'm happy to clarify that, go ahead.
There were two, I was wondering, if, I'm not sure if this was, like, in the special education piece, we had outplacements coming in. And I think there was a topic earlier around some of the intervention and kind of some of the flex spaces for special education, and how much was needed for that. Were you asking about that?
When the shortcomings of the different buildings, it was really only in the A5.
Okay,
The space wasn't included, I think all the other
okay,
options, it was
Hartford and-
in there.
okay, so that's that. And then
So,
there was a notion that came up in a couple of designs, and maybe it's been ruled out, but the central office being in town hall versus with the schools, is that?
So I show that in some options. I've never really understood how important or critical it is. I just know it's been brought up. So it is in a few of the options, but I include it as like, I think an add-on. So I mean, that could be a question, how important it is to consolidate central office together, and do you want it in the school? Is that the question? I mean,
I'm not taking a position on it, I'm just asking. It's come up several times, I don't
might as
know.
well put it in there as question number, whatever, 7.
Does anybody have any objection to having that question?
No.
No.
Adaptive.
And I thought of one other thing that may be a question when you're done.
Office into the school building. So the way I'm gonna word that is it a priority for the Board of Education to consider bringing central office rooms into the school buildings?
Or in
Central
school
office
buildings or
into
in
the
a
school
building?
Into a school building?
How much, just to kind of give,
What?
is it yes, no priority, or are you asking?
I said, is it a
No, I'm
priority?
asking across your questions, you saying, are we getting yes, no answers, or like, how much to get some sort of relative weighting?
I think a yes or answer would be useful.
Yeah.
That far.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna,
At least
I'm
if I
just gonna ask, is it a
That's
priority?
fine, that's
Like,
fine, yeah, I do that, yeah.
like, have it worded as, that's just the way I have it worded.
Okay. Alicia, you had a question?
Okay.
Yeah, on the existing map, the room down over there, next to the boiler room, it's noted on here as an intervention room, but that was space for after school. When we took the tour, right,
it's
there's a,
both. They need to have the space for after school and a general classroom. I know that.
well, when I took the tour, I asked a number of questions and I was told it was only for after school because they put their things in that room and they didn't want anybody else messing with their stuff.
So that's somewhat what I was told. I was told it's used for intervention, but the last period, they don't use it, so when they come in and get ready, it's available to them for the end of the school day.
Okay, because I guess we got two different stories then. So my question was going to be, because I'm thinking it's just an after-school room. How important is it to leave a room as after-school only? But if Michelle's telling me they're using it as intervention, but that's not what they told me. They told me it's not used during the day, it's used for after-school only. They didn't want to use it as any other kind of a classroom because they had their own stuff in there and they didn't want.
Here's where I think the difference is between your two answers,
Okay.
which is that for intervention, you don't necessarily, for some interventions, you only need a space to go into, right? So you can have a speech intervention, but just has a table in there where you don't need a lot of equipment stored in the room. So theoretically, I'm making an example here, but that's okay, so I'm sorry, I'll just be quiet then. Apparently I'm wrong. I can ask the question, that's fine, if you don't want the answer to that. My expectation, based off of my having that question, did we go on the tour together?
No, I don't think.
I
we
can't
should.
remember, no, I went on the tour with
No,
guys
good
and Penny.
job.
Oh, yeah.
When we talked about that room, my interpretation of whatever that room was going on there was that there was not being repurposed as a classroom for like general purpose education or like anything else that was like supply heavy, so that the after school stuff could be stored in there, but they were able to like use it for like some level of intervention services during the day. Just, they've got a cart,
Yeah,
they've got a
that's
cart
it.
of some stuff that they move around, that's kind of,
And I did say to them, do they pay for it? So
Huh?
do they pay for it? And we don't get any money for letting Ed Advance use one of our classrooms that was dedicated. That's why I was a little dumbfounded that we're dedicating a classroom for Ed Advance that nobody else can use during the day, yet you're not paying us any rent money for it.
I can separately ask for clarification on
Okay.
that, because I think that's probably a little bit of an easier answer, so it's
Yes.
unfair in terms of
So
like
so
the
it's
way
more
that
like,
that question is being asked.
is it important to keep a classroom empty for after school that doesn't get used for anything else, I guess, is kind of my question.
Okay, I'm happy to ask that. I would have a hard time with anybody saying no. With anybody kind of saying like, that is important. I don't think that's the intention of anything there, but I'm happy to ask that question if people feel it's important. It's
And
certainly
maybe
a
they just did
priority.
that because they had the room.
I thought they went to the gymnasium after school.
That was when Hunter was here too. They went into the gym and then they had other stuff that they had supplies and it's in that
Permanent
classroom.
change, yeah, I couldn't tell you about that. I can ask about the way that
Just
room is
because it
being
feels a
utilized.
wasted space. if
It is. Why use classrooms when they can be used for children during the day? And we're just keeping them empty during the
And if
day
it's
so
for
they can be after
intervention, you don't
school?
need such a big space just for an intervention room, right?
No, we program is a little smaller. Yeah, the room's 896 square feet. My note says, used daily after school for BASIS program, needs to be in a full-size space, but not a general classroom. So that could be the health room. It could be, or as long as there's no last period in there, basically.
Spanish.
Italian.
Yes.
German.
Let's learn Chinese.
You don't offer Chinese at Regents for the do
No, I
Anymore.
think they dropped it, right?
Good. I have the advantage of seeing your list. Are we asking specific, if reading literal with the questions, are you asking about anything with the Oak Hill classrooms? Is the questions about should expanded special education space be built into the design?
Should task force be considered? Does the Board of Ed intend to bring life skills or other outplaced services back to the schools?
There you go.
I will repeat that since I was mumbling. The special ed question I'm rewriting as, does the Board of Ed intend to bring life skills or other outplaced services back to the schools? Back to our school buildings?
We ask them, I mean, that works. Others, obviously, are we asking anything about the Oak Hill classrooms?
I'm not asking anything specifically about the Oak Hill classrooms. I don't want to talk about very specific rooms within the schools. That's just like, because it's immaterial. They might move sixth grade down here for one reason, or like move anything else up here. The purpose of this question is to understand, do we need to plan for space for in-house special ed services
Can you
beyond?
ask that? Do we need to plan for space then? Because yes, no, is does the board intend to bring this back in? Are there space, if so, are there space requirements? If so, what are the space requirements?
I don't think they would know.
We know what the
space
space requirements
We
are.
do.
What's that?
We know what the space requirements are, we're gonna do that.
If they're bringing in this grant that we were talking about earlier, like what is Mike, we should ask what Mike proposed in the grant then.
I don't understand what you're saying right
The
now.
grant, it was,
I understand the grant, I don't understand what you're saying to me right now.
if this is, if they're anticipating using the Oak Hill classrooms
there's not gonna be an answer to that. Like whether or not what the grant is being used for, we already know from the Board of Ed meeting the other night is that details are forthcoming on that. But I don't know what that means in terms of forthcoming or like when that would be applied. And what we need to understand in terms of what we're looking at right now is that like the go forward plan? Certainly to bring those things in-house so that we need to understand when we're looking at the overall map and square footage needed in the schools, do we need to plan for that square footage?
Okay, that works.
That's the way I'm interpreting, that's the way.
When we
I'm
did the
getting at.
walkthrough and we were standing over there, that's what Mike Lynch said. Is that they would
I
like-
understand, but I understand that is like, the administration would like to do that. What we need to understand for these questions, this is the exact gap that we're getting at. The programming needs were vetted and put into Michelle's work by the administration. So their recommendations and requests. The entire purpose of walking through this exercise and getting these questions is like, none of that, the Board of Ed was not consulted on any of that.
True.
So I'm trying to understand, what does the Board of Ed think about some of these differences? Because it has not been specifically brought forward to the Board of Ed. So I understand there's been talk about that, but it has not been officially sanctioned by the Board of Ed yet.
Or they can move everything around and maybe life skills will be done at that end.
Right,
I think you asked the question the way you got it, I think the answer's gonna come back, depends on whether we have room or not.
right,
With
right.
everything
So
else.
it's just a matter of, again, trying to be explicit. Do we need to plan for having this program in the schools?
Right.
Because that's as best as we can get right now. Not where is it going or how much space do you need, but like, do we need to consider that?
Okay.
And in my proposals, I do take that room because it's the right choice, but that's, you don't hear that there.
Okay. Should I run through the questions again?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Let's move on.
I want to make sure that we're all feeling good about that, okay? I will send that communication out tonight. And we'll figure out where to go. I'm gonna close this item of business out.
Well, can we actually talk about one more thing relevant to that?
Yes.
Item, and because we have not discussed it, we have a gap in superintendent right now,
So what?
a gap in superintendent.
Okay,
So I think that is, I don't know if it's within our purview of this board, but I would like to suggest that this board send a note or send a letter to the Board of Ed that school facility utilization is a topic of conversation with the interview process, either history of or awareness of. Because I think it would be very erroneous to bring in a superintendent that was not aware of the reality of what's going on with the school district right now. And I just want to make sure that that is part of the interview process.
That's a good idea.
Good idea. Would you also include the interim?
Yeah.
the expectation is that we will have
Okay.
an interim superintendent while we conduct a longer superintendent search.
Yeah, I think definitely for the longer term, and it just has to be a part of the process because we're going to need information from this individual, whether they're interim and or long-term. And I think a formal request, this be part of the interview process come from
Does
this.
this be part, so what about this in particular should be part of the review process for the superintendent?
That they're aware of what we're doing.
That just that they are
That they're
aware.
aware that there's a school facility utilization
Okay,
that is underway, and if they have experience in
Right.
school utilization, or just to have that as part of, if we're looking at apple versus orange and some candidate comes in of like, yeah, I actually went through a consolidation or a new school project, I think that should be of significance in the interview process. But I think it would be good to have something formally requested within the interview process from this task force.
so you're making a motion, right?
And making a motion.
I'll second your motion.
So a motion by Carrie, seconded by Penny, to write a formal recommendation. to-
Request.
Request or recommendation?
Request.
Request to the Board of Education to specifically ask about a candidate's experience with school facility utilization.
To one, make sure that the school facility is to the candidate's attention, that we are undergoing this process just as a general update, and that if they have experience within school consolidation and or new buildings and or.
Like this interview process or job search process, I think more broadly would be helpful, because it even be incorporated into the posting, like the spec that's created.
Yeah, I have no idea how
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
interview
that's why
process
I was
goes. That's
asking
why
about the request for
Yeah.
recommendation, like,
No,
was
it's a
recommended that they find some way to take that into consideration when they're looking at superintendents.
Right.
We think it would be valuable for
Yes.
somebody to have experience in.
As they
that topic.
mentioned the other night, they'll ask, Ed Advance is going to help us get candidates for for interim or permanent superintendent. The person that helped us the last time get Jeff, he's also doing it again this time. We can tell him, or Tim can tell him, that we also would like to be included in his, when the information is given to this man that's gonna help us, that this person that we wanna interview, we're asking for candidates that have, they know that we have a school utilization task force, and we're also thinking about consolidation. Do they have any experience in that? I don't wanna say line of work, but do they have any experience in?
I just think we ought to just tell them to ask them to make them aware, the candidate aware,
Right.
that we're going through this process,
Yeah.
period. Not asking about their, not.
Yeah, I
get into
don't
the
wanna
interview
go
process.
through that, I wanna
Yeah,
make
nothing
sure
to do
Just
with
my
it.
motion, first motion is very complex, the second is much more simple. I think just
Yeah.
a simple motion so that it's,
Yeah, so and that's also why I'm asking about like a request versus a recommendation, because I wanna be like respectful. I think it would come up. So really just a reinforcement that like, we wanna make sure that this is on the radar if we're looking at stuff.
you also have 3 liaisons from Board of Education who are here, who can stress the importance of this process going forward. So, I mean, I'm saying you can make it formal, I'm saying you can make it, I know, I'm not saying not to, but just the notion of like, the formal can work. There's also the fact that the 3 of us know the importance of this and can reiterate that, so.
But the only thing is, when Ed Advance helps us, it's Tim that does the talking to the Ed Advance people and gets this gentleman to help us.
There's gonna be a search committee created.
You're way out of scope right now.
What's that?
We are just way out of scope right now.
Is her motion seconded?
Yes,
Yeah, and then it was discussed, but I think it's gonna get turned down to be more simplified. Is that what we're gonna go for? Okay. So all in favor, oh, sorry, Chair. Forget it. I'm just used to the same.
Now you're bored.
Damn, wait.
got your Board of Finance now? The last time, John, we looked for somebody, it was the whole Board of Ed that was part of the process of finding
The
the
whole board.
interim and the permanent.
So
This
we're
is the
gonna,
wording I have.
okay, so we're gonna shut this one down and then redo.
Okay, so that motion is being withdrawn.
Well, no.
Yeah, you can withdraw.
Yeah, you can withdraw.
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead and withdraw. That motion is
withdraw.
withdrawn. Would anybody like to make a motion at this time?
Here we go.
Who had who had a more simplified version? John, go for
Or
it.
I have a clean version,
Okay.
I
Go
think
for
we're
it.
gonna try, so there
Okay,
is potentially a motion on the floor that the task force send a formal request to the Board of Education that candidates in the superintendent search be informed of the ongoing school facility utilization task force process. That encompasses what we're looking for. All right, who wants to make that motion?
I make that.
Carrie
motion.
makes that motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Seconded by,
Second.
who wants to take it? Penny wants to take it. All those in favor? Aye, that is unanimous. Great. Any other discussion under new business review of Board of Education discussion?
No.
All right, let's move on to item F, public comment.
I was surprised, right? I'll try to be brief. It's not my long suit. I sent you guys a
Name
list.
and address, please, for our.
Shelley Lloyd, 29 Pioneer Drive.
Thank you.
that it's unreasonable for us to have things in this town now that my school district, which is a neighboring town, added to their school and they did consolidation 30 years ago. Art and music separation was one of them. I'm glad you have that question to ask. Is your question also including separation of gym and cafeteria? Is that in there as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to go on the record as saying, you have programs in your school district now that have insufficient facilities. I mean, I hope you know that. And you need to, I think, recognize that your programming that you currently have needs to have the facilities that it needs to do a good job. I'm talking about OT in the hallways, PT in the hallways, speech therapists that are in rooms way, way, way down the hall. I mean, you've got insufficient facilities for some of the things you currently have. So anyway, I really loved the presentation that the fellow from DACO did. I thought it was very efficient, very well laid out, extremely easy to understand. There's been a lot of discussion around this table about the driveway usage if this school is expanded and how what the impact of additional buses will be and how that will affect the fire station and all this other business. He made it pretty clear tonight that there's not going to be much for additional buses. 2 additional buses really isn't a lot. This school has been here for, how many, 25 years with one driveway. And on occasion, when my kids were here, seriously, on occasion, there was a fire and the buses couldn't come or go because the fire engines and firemen had to come and go. I don't think it happened more than a handful of times the whole time both of my kids were here in this building. In terms of the number of buses that have come and gone in this building, in 1996, 1997, my son was a 6th grader in this building. There were 100 students just in the 6th grade. There were 5 sessions of a number of classes and 4 sessions of the rest in 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and all of the Bakerville kindergarten students were here. So they were doing a lot of buses coming up, and I think it probably exceeded 9. Somebody would have to go and they would have to, ferret that out with the bus company in terms of how many buses they actually had coming up here. They also had a bus that ran from the basic care program, the early and basic care, down to Bakerville School to take the kids to school. So you had buses coming and going all the time. I honestly really think that's a concern you need to take off the table, just like building on a ledge. I mean, you're sitting in a building that's built on a ledge, okay? I really hope that you can get some of your questions answered. I think the current programming concerns I have of current facilities for the current programs you have absolutely need to be addressed. Michelle addressed a lot of them in her suggestions for things that you should consider in your buildings. I'm actually kind of curious why you're still talking about Bakerville, because I thought at the last meeting, you guys voted that you couldn't do anything on the Bakerville site because of the number of issues that were there. Did I misinterpret
For
that?
clarification, the options that we intended to take off the table at the last meeting were the bigger expansions at Bakerville.
Right, and
The
so
consolidation of,
what's left? I mean,
it is maintaining the
Leaving it the
existing
way it is.
facility, which again would require at some point replacing the portables.
so
And like
regardless.
there are other deferred maintenance pieces that are in there,
Right,
so.
so regardless of what is happening, if you chose to keep 3 schools open, and if that's an option, regardless of whatever else happens, you're still having to do construction at Bakerville because the portables have to go away. And you won't have enough space there for the current enrollment of the school without those 4 classrooms. Just a point of order.
I think they're just being thorough. We're gonna get the numbers
I
and see
know.
what comes back, and then we'll make a decision
Here we go.
on what we wanna do.
Huh?
That's good.
Okay, any other public comment? Yes,
I'll be brief. John Lloyd, 29 Pioneer Drive. If anything, this meeting has reemphasized a comment that I made quite a while ago, and I've raised the point, you need to set deadlines. I haven't been following them. If you go on the timeline that you posted, the final presentation was due to be delivered on the 9th of August. Obviously, you're past that point, and obviously there's other problems that have to be resolved. But you have been at this for quite a long time. And the only way this gets wrapped up is if you start setting deadlines and trying to maintain it. They will inevitably slip. But to continue this process without setting a deadline, and publicizing it to all the other parties who are like the Board of Ed, like whatever we have for administration. You need to start doing it. Otherwise, you're just gonna be spinning your wheels. You have an architect who I read the timeline, who's basically not been able to do anything since April. That's the last cross off on this sheet. It hasn't been updated since, so it is way past time to set deadlines. That's it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Great. Thank you, guys. Oh, anything from anybody online? Great, I'm gonna close public comment for now. I'm going to recommend that we table old business. Sam was doing the summary for the staff stakeholder survey, and she was unable to join us tonight, so I don't have anything to update here. Any objections? I should have done.
I guess that's one question regarding old business. Maybe, I think you may have touched on it in the last meeting, I don't know. But has anybody looked at, does it make any sense at all to close in Norfolk Elementary atrium, and you'd have that space that can be utilized for offices or rooms that don't need a window? Is that feasible at all? Would it?
You have to have a window. You have to have daylight. It's a requirement of the state.
In every room?
I mean, some offices don't have it.
Right.
I don't think so. I can look into it, but.
We
had
talked
talked
about
about
it,
it, and it
we
also
did, I did bring it up at the last meeting, and
We did
the
talk
thing, but there's still classrooms that sit on that. Like, there's still classrooms that sit alongside the atrium.
And that's the problem. Once you fill that in, you're blocking all the classrooms.
There's egress issues or something too with that,
With the
with
courtyard?
the courtyard of not egressing, not using the right word, but.
No, you're right. It's,
Okay.
you need 2 ways out, and they're supposed to be directly out, and those ones aren't quite direct.
Yeah.
So often when that happens, which it does in schools, they just don't really use them for students. But if we did it on it as new, we would fix that problem.
Item H is just, our next meeting is, it's a regular meeting scheduled for September 9th, 2026 here at Angelini. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn at 9:30.
So moved by Penny to adjourn at 9:30, with a second. John, with a second by John. All those in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.